The incense at Park Sung-jin's funeral was thick enough to make your eyes water, but the woman in the front row looked like she was enjoying every second of it. While 100 men in dark suits bowed their heads in mourning, Lee Myrae, the widow, just stood there in her black silk. She wasn't crying, not even a little. If you looked close enough, the corner of her mouth was actually twitching upward. It wasn't a mistake or a mask of grief slipping. It was a victory lap. She thought she'd won the game. She thought the Shadow King was finally buried and his secrets were going into the dirt with him. She had no clue that thousands of miles away, in a tiny, cramped apartment in Atlanta, a black waitress named Naomi Evans was staring at her phone with shaking hands. Her thumb was hovering over a send button that was about to blow Myrae's perfect life apart. Before I tell you how a quiet act of kindness changed everything, let me ask you something. Have you ever helped someone, not knowing who they really were? Have you ever chosen compassion, even when the world treated you unfairly? If you understand that kind of strength, subscribe. Not for me, but because stories like this prove that sometimes the people the world overlooks are the ones heaven uses to shift destinies. Naomi Evans was used to being invisible. For 4 years at Hanguk in Seoul, she was basically just part of the furniture. She was the one who refilled the water before you even asked and took the insults from rude customers without saying a single word. She was 34, bone-tired, and just trying to keep her daughter fed and her mother in a decent nursing home. But the old man who started showing up every Tuesday at 6:47 p.m. didn't look past her. He looked right at her. Most people saw a frail old retiree in a suit that had seen better days. Naomi saw something else. A man whose silence felt like a heavy weight, like a mountain that hadn't moved in 1,000 years. To understand why a billionaire's widow is now terrified of a waitress from Midtown, we have to go back to the night a ghost sat down at table 7. The bell above the door at Hanguk in Seoul chimed at exactly 6:47 p.m. Naomi didn't even have to look at the clock. She just knew his rhythm. She grabbed a menu and a glass of room-temperature water, her feet aching from a back-to-back double shift. The man at table 7 was always there, like clockwork. He wore this dark suit that looked a little lived in, but you could tell it was expensive, the kind of fabric that cost more than Naomi's car. He never even glanced at the menu. He just wanted his doenjang jjiggy and a little bit of peace. "Good evening, sir," Naomi told him, trying to put on a smile that didn't feel as fake as it was. He looked up, and man, his eyes weren't old at all. They were sharp, piercing. It was the kind of look that made you feel like he was reading your whole life story, every secret you ever kept, in 5 seconds. It actually gave her a chill, like a warning bell going off in the back of her head. But then he just gave her this tiny, respectful nod. "Thank you," he said. His English was careful, deliberate, and heavy, like every word he spoke cost him something. As Naomi walked away, she noticed the loud-mouthed guys at the bar suddenly shut up. They didn't even want to look in his direction. It was the kind of silence you only see when people are genuinely afraid of who's in the room with them, even if they don't know why. Clara, the manager, was a piece of work. She was one of those people who treated service workers like they were disposable. She didn't just want Naomi fired. She wanted her life ruined because Naomi wouldn't bow down to her. Right in the middle of the dinner rush, Clara started screaming. She claimed $300 was missing from the till and pointed her finger right at Naomi's face. "I knew we couldn't trust you. You're careless and you're a thief," she yelled, making sure every customer heard her. Then the kitchen guy, who was basically Clara's lapdog, pulled a stack of bills out of Naomi's locker. It was a total setup, but Naomi was too stunned to even find the words to defend herself. Clara's husband, the owner, came charging out from the back, red-faced and ready to scream. He was a split second away from kicking Naomi out the door for good and calling the cops. But then, the whole restaurant went ice cold. Park Sung-jin stood up at table 7. He didn't shout. He didn't even move fast. He just looked at the owner, and honestly, the owner's knees actually started to shake. "I am not finished with my dinner," Park said. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the whole room like thunder. "And she is the only person here who knows how to do her job. She stays until I am finished." The owner looked like he'd seen a ghost. He stammered some apology and told Naomi to get back to work, but he whispered that she was gone the second the old man walked out. Naomi stood there, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was still a waitress, but for the first time in years, she felt like she had a shield. Naomi finished that shift in a total fog. Every table she cleared felt like a countdown. She knew the clock was ticking. The second Park left, she was toast. Around midnight, after the lights were low and she was supposed to be heading home, she saw a sleek black sedan roll into the back parking lot. Something felt wrong, so instead of leaving, she ducked into the shadows of the alleyway, hiding behind a pile of crates. She watched Clara come out the back door, looking all paranoid and clutching a big manila envelope like it was made of gold. She ran over to the car like her life depended on it. The back window rolled down just a crack, and Naomi saw a pale hand covered in expensive lace. A diamond ring caught the moonlight, and it was so big it looked like it could cut glass. "Is she handled?" the woman in the car asked. Her voice was pure ice. "The old man protected her tonight," Clara hissed, "but I'll have the cops pick her up tomorrow. She's seen way too much of his business." Naomi caught the whole thing on her phone. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it. She realized then that Clara wasn't just a bad boss. She was working with someone to take down the only man who had ever stood up for Naomi. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a witness to a murder in progress. It was the very last hour of Naomi's shift. Park Sung-jin was sitting at table 7, but he looked different, frail, like he was fatting away right there in the booth. He didn't order anything this time. He just put a small, hand-carved wooden box on the table. Naomi walked over, her heart in her throat, especially after what she'd just seen in the alley. She wanted to tell him, but she didn't know how. "You're a good soul, Naomi," he told her. His voice was a dry rasp, and it sounded like it hurt to talk. "People like Clara think they can throw you away because they think you're nothing. But they're wrong. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the only one who can save the house." He pushed the box toward her with a trembling hand. "The owner is coming to fire you in 5 minutes. When he does, don't argue. Go out the back. Go to the address inside this box." Naomi looked at the box, then at the man who looked like he was saying goodbye. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Because," he said, and for a second, a real smile touched his face. "You're the only one who actually saw me. Now it's time for the rest of the world to see you." As the owner started marching toward the table, Naomi gripped that box tight. The game had officially started. Tuesday came around, but the restaurant was quiet. No bell at 6:47. Naomi was standing across the street, hiding under a bus stop awning, clutching her bag like her life depended on it. She waited and waited, but table 7 stayed empty. She finally went home and clicked on the news, and that's when it hit her. The headline was everywhere on every channel. "Death of the Shadow King." There was a picture of her regular customer, but he wasn't in his old suit. He was in a tuxedo, looking like a man who owned the entire city of Seoul. He wasn't some retiree. He was the head of the most powerful crime family in East Asia. Naomi felt like the room was spinning. She was just a waitress from Atlanta. How did she end up in the middle of a mafia war? But she didn't have time to think. A low hum started outside her apartment. She looked out the blinds and saw 3 big, glossy black SUVs just sitting there, engines running. Men in dark suits got out, and they weren't there to order soup. They were looking for the box. Naomi realized then that Park hadn't just given her a gift, he'd given her a target on her back. He had made her a part of his world, whether she was ready for it or not. You know what's powerful? She didn't help him because he was important. She helped him because he was human. And the world rarely rewards women like that. If you've ever done the right thing when nobody was watching, you already feel this. Don't just watch silently, subscribe. Join a space where quiet strength finally gets the recognition it deserves. Naomi backed away from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Those SUVs weren't moving. They were just waiting for her to make a mistake. She grabbed the wooden box and fumbled with the latch, her hands so sweaty she could barely get a grip. With a loud crack, the thing finally popped open. There wasn't any gold or cash inside, just a sleek black burner phone and her own old work ID card. She turned the phone on, and the screen lit up with a video file titled "For the Witness." When she hit play, Park's face filled the screen. He looked strong in the video, like the king the news was talking about. "If you're seeing this, Naomi, the wolves are already at your door," he said. His voice was steady and deep. "My wife thinks she's inherited everything. She doesn't realize that a real empire is built on trust and character, not blood. You were the only one who treated me like a person when I had nothing to offer. That's why you're the only one I trust with the truth." He started reading off a bunch of numbers and coordinates. Naomi realized then that he wasn't just giving her a legacy, he was giving her the keys to his whole kingdom. He had chosen her to be his final move against the people who betrayed him. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the most dangerous woman in the city because she held the truth. The next morning was a total disaster. Naomi woke up to her phone blowing up with texts from people she hadn't talked to in years. She turned on the local news and nearly dropped her coffee. Her face was right there on the screen under a headline that read, "Former waitress wanted for high-level theft." Clara hadn't just fired her. She'd framed her for a crime that could put her away for life. She had planted some fake bank records at the restaurant to make it look like Naomi was stealing from the business to help a criminal organization. Naomi was trapped. If she went to the cops, she'd get cuffed immediately. If she stayed in the apartment, those guys in the SUVs were going to come through the door. She felt like the world was closing in on her. She looked at the back of her work ID card and saw a tiny address written in ink that she hadn't noticed before. "When the world turns dark, look for the dragon." Right then, she heard a loud, heavy thud at her front door. They weren't waiting anymore. Naomi grabbed her jacket, the burner phone, and the box. She scrambled out the back window and down the rusted fire escape just as her front door was kicked off its hinges. She was officially a fugitive, and the only thing she had left was a dead man's secret. Naomi ended up at this old, rusted-out warehouse by the train tracks. It smelled like oil, wet concrete, and old metal, and it looked completely abandoned. But she found a hidden sensor behind a loose brick and tapped her work ID against it. The heavy steel door actually hissed open. Inside, it looked like something out of a movie, screens everywhere, humming servers, and a cool blue light. A young guy with tattoos all over his neck, Jinho, stood up from a desk. He didn't look at her like she was a waitress. He bowed, deep and respectful. "We've been waiting for you, witness," he said. Naomi realized then that Park had planned all of this. He'd groomed her to survive this moment. The burner phone started unlocking files that showed every single person Myre had bribed, poisoned, or threatened to get to the top. Naomi felt the fear she'd been carrying for years start to turn into something else. It was cold. It was sharp. It was a reason to fight back. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the one with the information that could burn a dynasty to the ground. She looked at Jinho and held up the phone. "Show me how to use this," she said. She was done running. It was time to hunt. Naomi knew the wooden box was just the start. The real key, the physical drive for Park's untraceable accounts, was still hidden at the restaurant. She had to go back to the lion's den. She slipped into Hanguk and Seoul after hours, the rain drumming on the roof like a frantic heartbeat. The place felt empty and haunted. She was on her knees, unscrewing the secret compartment in Table 7's leg when the lights slammed on. Clara was standing there, looking like a total mess, holding a glass of scotch and a kitchen knife. "You think you're so special?" Clara screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "You were just a charity case for a monster. You're nothing without him." Naomi stood up slowly, holding the heavy silver drive she'd just found. She didn't feel scared. She just felt sorry for her. "You spent years looking down on me, Clara," Naomi told her quietly. "But you were so busy making sure I knew my place that you never noticed you were the one losing yours." Right then, the front door burst open. The men in suits marched in, but they didn't even glance at Clara. They all turned toward Naomi and bowed. The look on Clara's face was pure terror. She finally realized she had picked a fight with the wrong woman, and the woman she had treated like furniture was now the person holding her fate. When the truth came out, when she realized who he really was, it was already too late. Not because she was in danger, but because fate had already chosen her. And here's the part nobody talks about. The world fears powerful men, but it underestimates powerful women. If you've ever been underestimated, this channel is your space. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for every moment a silent woman changed her destiny. The guys in the restaurant weren't just random thugs. They were Park's inner circle, the people he trusted most, and now they were Naomi's shadow. Jinho stepped forward, his eyes on the silver drive in her hand. He didn't try to take it. He just waited for her to say something. Naomi realized she wasn't the help anymore. She was the one holding the authority. "Park said you were a survivor," Jinho told her, and you could hear the real respect in his voice. He was surrounded by people who wanted his money. But you were the only one who didn't want anything. That makes you the most dangerous person he ever met. Naomi looked at Clara, who was sobbing on the floor. This woman had tried to ruin her life over a few bucks, and now she was looking at a level of power she couldn't even imagine. Naomi felt a strange, cold peace. She wasn't just clearing her name, she was going to finish what Park started. "Get me a plane to Seoul," Naomi said. Her voice didn't shake once. "And find me a suit. I'm done wearing this apron." She walked out into the rain, the men in suits following her like a wall of iron. Naomi was high above the ocean, staring out the window of a private jet. It didn't feel real, but the weight of the burner phone in her pocket reminded her it was. Jinho had explained that Myrae was already trying to sell off Park's assets and move the money offshore. She thought she was winning because she had the title, but she didn't have the codes. Naomi pulled up the photo she'd taken in the alley, the one of Clara and the woman in the car. It was the proof of the conspiracy. She sent it straight to Myrae's private phone with no caption. 3 minutes later, a picture came back. It was Naomi's apartment building in Atlanta, burned to the ground. A threat. "I can destroy your whole world." But Naomi didn't blink. She'd already lost everything she owned. She had nothing left to be scared of. She typed back a message that she knew would hit Myrae like a punch to the gut. "You smiled at his funeral, but you'll scream at your own." She turned the phone off and watched the sun set over the horizon. The invisible Waitress was landing in Seoul, and she was bringing the fire with her. Seoul was cold, misty, and smelled of wood smoke and rain when Naomi landed. She wasn't the woman from the restaurant anymore. She was wearing a charcoal wool coat that felt like armor and dark glasses that hid her eyes. Jinho was right beside her like a shadow. They drove to the Park estate, this massive, traditional fortress that looked like it had been there for 1,000 years, guarded by men with cold eyes. It was the final memorial service for Park. The whole place was overflowing with white chrysanthemums and the thick scent of expensive incense. Naomi walked through the gates, her heart beating like a drum, but she didn't slow down. Every head turned. The big-time crime bosses, men who had spent years fearing Park's name, were staring at this black woman in the charcoal coat. They didn't know what to make of her. In the middle of the hall, Myrae was playing the grieving widow perfectly. She was giving a speech, her voice shaking with fake tears when she saw Naomi. The microphone let out a loud, piercing squeal as Myrae's hand gripped the stand. The whole room went dead silent. Naomi didn't wait for anyone to tell her what to do. She walked right up to the altar and stopped a few feet from Myrae, looking her dead in the eye. "You told Clara I should know my place," Naomi said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "But you forgot one thing. Mr. Park didn't care about titles. He cared about loyalty. He chose me because I stayed when everyone else left." She plugged the silver drive into the big screen behind the altar before Myrae could even blink. The screen flickered, but it wasn't a tribute to Park's life. It was a high-def video from a hidden camera in his bedroom. The whole room gasped as they watched Myrae calmly stirring something into Park's tea, the poison that had been slowly killing him for months. Then the picture changed to the alley in Atlanta. Clara handing the envelope to Myrae, their faces clear as day under the moonlight, talking about how they were going to get rid of him. "He knew," Naomi said, her voice echoing through the hall like a judgment. "He knew you were killing him from the very start. He just wanted to see if there was a single person in this world who would stand up for him while he watched the end. He chose me because I saw a human being where you only saw an obstacle." Myrae lost it. She lunged at Naomi, screaming like a wild animal, but Jinho and the other guards stepped in. They weren't her men anymore. They were the loyalists who had been waiting for the signal from the witness. The back doors burst open and the Seoul police came flooding in. The smile was gone from Myrae's face, replaced by a hollow, ugly sobbing as they put her in cuffs. Thousands of miles away, the feds were kicking in Clara's door too. The whole house of cards was finally coming down, and the woman they thought was invisible was the one who pulled the thread. Naomi went back to Atlanta, but not to the shadows. She was the new owner of Hanguk and Seoul. She sat at table 7, touching the wood where Park used to sit every Tuesday at 6:47 p.m. She had a final letter from his lawyers. It wasn't just the money. It was a deed to her mom's nursing home and a college fund for her daughter that would take care of them forever. She remembered her grandma's favorite verse, "Your reward will shine like the dawn." Park didn't just give her a fortune. He gave her back the dignity the world tried to take away. Kindness wasn't a weakness. It was the strongest thing she had. In the end, it wasn't money. It wasn't protection. It was respect. And sometimes that's the rarest reward of all. If this story reminded you that kindness is never weakness, subscribe right now. Because somewhere out there, another woman is choosing goodness in silence, and your one click helps her story be told.